What's not classified is that it was an incredibly successful mission against the Houthis.
Okay, so it was classified. So are you trying to say that the information was unclassified?
I'm not trying to say anything.
That's what I thought. You're not saying that. So you took classified information from Central Command that had a classification marking on it, because that's what's required by DoD regulations, and you put it on an unclassified system. So we're going to get a report in a few days from the DoD Inspector General. And if the DoD Inspector General finds what is pretty obvious, both to you smiling there in the witness seat and to all of us up here, that the information was, in fact, classified, do you plan to take any accountability for that?
Okay. So what happened during that virtual hearing at 8:45 p.m. Eastern tonight was broadcast to 75 million viewers worldwide. And I need everyone to understand that we just watched the President of the United States have a complete psychological breakdown on live television while calling a federal judge a Nazi and declaring that the Constitution means nothing and that he is the law. This was not a political statement or rhetorical excess. This was a man disintegrating mentally in real time as his entire world collapsed around him. Judge Barl Howell immediately held him in contempt with 6 months maximum jail time and cut the feed as Trump continued screaming threats into the void. Come on, are you kidding me with this? The president looked into a camera being watched by 75 million people and said, "The judge is a Nazi and the Constitution means nothing and I am the law." Those are his exact words from the official transcript. He called the founding document of the United States fake newspaper. He claimed to be the law itself, not subject to law but identical with it. This is the language of absolute dictatorship delivered by a president of a constitutional republic. 75 million people watched him say it. The moment is preserved forever. The collapse was triggered when Judge Howell admitted the Delta Force autopsy photos showing 132 civilian deaths, including the faces of dead children killed under rules of engagement Trump personally signed. When those photos appeared on screen, Trump began pounding his fists on the table and the deterioration began. He started screaming about Soviet tyranny and Nazi judges and fake constitutions. He could not process what he was seeing because what he was seeing was the evidence of his crimes displayed for the world. His mind broke. Judge Howell's contempt finding was instantaneous, issued while Trump was still screaming. The order cites a calculated assault on judicial authority and imposes the maximum 6-month sentence available for criminal contempt. That sentence runs consecutive to whatever punishment results from the war crimes charges and the other pending matters. Trump has now accumulated contempt findings that could keep him in jail for years before the main charges are even tried. Fox News cut their feed after 90 seconds of the rant. The first time in memory that the network has cut away from Trump because his conduct was too extreme to broadcast. 90 seconds of a president calling a judge a Nazi and claiming to be the law was apparently the limit even for his most loyal media allies. The other networks continued coverage with analysts providing real-time commentary on what appeared to be a mental health crisis unfolding on live television. The logistics that Judge Howell established during the hearing before Trump's collapse show marshals breaching Mar-a-Lago gates by 11 p.m. tonight. The arrest operation is proceeding regardless of anything Trump says or does. The gates will be breached, the property will be entered, Trump will be taken into custody. His screaming does not change that reality. His contempt findings do not change that reality. The only thing his conduct changes is how many additional charges he faces and how history records his final hours in office. The 75 million viewers represent the largest real-time audience for any event involving a sitting president since the moon landing. More people watched Trump's mental collapse than watched his inaugurations or his State of the Union addresses or any other moment of his presidency. This is what he will be remembered for. Not any policy achievement or political victory, but this moment of complete psychological disintegration broadcast live to the world. All right, so let me really dig into what happened during that hearing and what it reveals about Trump's mental state and why legal experts are saying the contempt finding may be the least significant consequence of what the world witnessed tonight. The footage from that hearing will be analyzed by historians and psychologists and political scientists for generations, trying to understand how a president could deteriorate so completely in such a public way. The hearing was scheduled as a routine deposition, proceeding to establish facts for the war crimes case stemming from the Venezuela raid. Trump appeared via video link from Mar-a-Lago, surrounded by his remaining legal team. Judge Howell appeared from her chambers in Washington. The proceeding began with standard preliminaries and evidentiary motions. Nothing suggested the catastrophe that was about to unfold. The trigger was the admission of Exhibit 47 through 63, the autopsy photographs of civilian casualties from Operation Absolute Resolve. The photos were introduced to establish the factual record of deaths resulting from the rules of engagement Trump approved. Defense counsel objected but was overruled. The photos appeared on screen and Trump began his descent. The first sign of deterioration was physical, his face weening and his hands beginning to shake as he looked at the images. Then came the table pounding, rhythmic fist strikes that caused his video to shake. Then came the verbal assault, starting with accusations that the photos were fabricated and escalating rapidly to the Nazi comparison and the constitutional attacks. The progression took approximately 4 minutes from first sign of distress to full psychological collapse. The transcript captures statements that will define this moment in history. Quote, "Judge is Nazi Soviet tyrant destroying America." Quote, "Constitution is fake newspaper written by losers." Quote, "I am the law and my word overrides everything." Quote, "You will all pay when I am done with you." Each statement was captured clearly on video and audio. Each statement constitutes additional grounds for contempt and potentially additional criminal charges, including threatening a federal judge. Judge Howell's response was measured but firm. She warned Trump after the first outburst that he was approaching contempt. She warned him again after the Nazi comparison that he was in contempt and should stop speaking. When he continued, declaring himself to be the law, she issued the formal finding and ordered the feed cut. Her composure throughout Trump's tirade stood in stark contrast to his disintegration. The judicial system functioned even as the executive branch representative attacked it. The 6-month maximum contempt sentence reflects the statutory limits on judicial contempt authority. For more serious punishment, Trump would need to be prosecuted separately for threatening a federal judge or for criminal contempt through the standard prosecution process. Those charges may well be filed. The conduct captured on video provides overwhelming evidence for conviction. Fox News cutting the feed after 90 seconds represents a historic break between Trump and his most loyal media outlet. The network has defended Trump through every scandal and amplified his messaging through every controversy. But apparently, there are limits even to Fox's tolerance. A president calling a judge a Nazi and declaring himself above the Constitution exceeded those limits. The cutaway was itself news, a signal that even Trump's media allies recognize he has gone too far. The 75 million viewers break down across platforms, approximately 30 million on broadcast and cable networks, 25 million streaming online, and 20 million on social media platforms carrying the feed. The global audience was even larger with international networks providing coverage. Trump's collapse was the most watched presidential moment in history because it was the most unprecedented presidential moment in history. Legal analysts commenting in real time described what they were watching as disqualifying under any standard for holding public office. Constitutional scholars noted that the statements themselves, declaring the Constitution meaningless and claiming to be the law, constitute grounds for removal under the 14th Amendment's disqualification clause for rebellion against the constitutional order. Mental health professionals cautioned against remote diagnosis, but noted behavior patterns consistent with severe psychological distress. The connection to the autopsy photo suggests Trump could not psychologically process the visual evidence of what his orders caused. Seeing the faces of dead children killed under rules of engagement he signed may have overwhelmed whatever psychological defenses he had constructed. The cognitive dissonance between his self-image as a winner and the reality of mass civilian death apparently triggered the break. He could not reconcile what he was seeing with who he believes himself to be. The Marshall timeline established before Trump's collapse remains in effect. Gates breached by 11 p.m., property secured, Trump located and taken into custody, transport to detention facility. The arrest proceeds regardless of his mental state. If anything, his behavior during the hearing strengthens the justification for taking him into custody immediately. A president in psychological crisis with access to nuclear codes and military command authority represents a national security threat requiring immediate resolution.